On this episode of Militaria at the Museum, we examine the Normandy Briefing Map, a critical tool that shaped the success of D-Day. Next, we highlight the resilience of a Canso pilot who faced daunting challenges with unwavering courage during his missions. Finally, we explore the humanitarian impact of HMCS Cape Scotts' mission to Easter Island. Beyond museum exhibits lies a hidden realm of archived artifacts that hold the keys to unlocking intriguing stories from the past. Come along as I meet with experts at the Army, Naval, and Aviation museums, where I've been granted special access to pull back the curtains and reveal the secrets of their Militaria. My name is Sandy Hiltz, and all my life I've been captivated by military history. Now, I have the rare opportunity to explore a collection of fascinating military artifacts on Militaria at the Museum. At the Army Museum, we'll explore a massive briefing map used during the D-Day invasion. This rare map was critical for coordinating Allied forces on the beaches of Normandy, providing vital geographical details that helped shape the success of the operation. Here we are, the 6th of June, 1944, Normandy. There must have been a tremendous amount of planning going on up until that day.
Planning for the invasion of Northwest Europe started years before the actual invasion because everyone knew they needed to get back into Northwest Europe. They didn't want where they were going to invade to become public knowledge. So there was great deception plans put into place, and they were training for amphibious operations, how to land and all that. They just didn't know where they were going to go. D-Day is the designated day, and it's the day designated in an operation plan for something to happen. We have taken D-Day and assigned it to the invasion of Normandy, but there were many D-Days throughout time. In this context, it's the invasion of Normandy.
And does the museum here have any materials relating to that planning?
We do. We have a very large 9-foot by 6-foot briefing map that was used to brief the soldiers and the commanders on the ground that they were going to be covering when they invaded Normandy, and they would have been briefed on where they were going at the last possible moments.
Oh, that's fascinating. Could we go see that map?
Yeah, we can go up there right now.
Excellent.
This map represents on the ground 25 kilometers by about 12 kilometers. So basically, it's the entire divisional front of the 3rd Canadian Division that landed at Normandy.
This thing is huge. Why is it that we can't unwrap it?
It's 80 years old. This is a hand-drawn, a newsprint type material that's very acidic and over time is very fragile. So every time you unroll it and roll it back up, you're going to damage the artifact.
And at 9 feet long, it would have been quite cumbersome to have made its way back here.
Precisely. That's why it amazes me that it exists. I can only think it was on one of the ships. They'd probably be briefing as they're crossing or when they're sitting in the port. So someone rolled this up, shoved it in a corner, thankfully.
So 80 years on, something like this must be quite rare, is it?
I believe so, yeah, because it's 80-year-old piece of paper that wouldn't have been the highest quality. It's not laminated. It's just raw paper, probably some form of acid paper. So it's very fragile.
Given its size, there must have been quite a large group that would have been looking at this map.
Who used this one is up to imagination. I don't know for a fact who used this map, but it could have been used by the division commander of the 3rd Canadian Division to brief his brigade commanders and the supporting arms.
What would be the sort of chain of communication that was going on around the usage of this map?
Well, it all starts with the Supreme Commander briefing his Army commanders. The Army commanders then brief their Corps commanders that are involved in this. The Corps commanders then brief their division commanders, and it goes down the chain like that. So it's not one briefing. The initial briefings would have been quite secret, once they decide they're going to Normandy, because they can't let that get out. So only those in the know would have known to a certain level. Did the div commanders know? They probably did. but then that would be the end of it. Then the brigade commanders would have been briefed, and the regimental commanders and battalion commanders. It's very pointed chain like that, with Supreme Commander there, and then it just trickles down. Strategy is important at high levels, but it's got to make its way down so that everyone understands the plan and everyone understands what the goal is and the mission is.
So the average soldier's landing that day would not have seen this map?
No, not at all. His battalion commander would have had some form of this. And it may not have been as elaborate as this. It could have been, okay, we're going to the bunk over there, and I'm going to get a whole bunch of bullets. We're landing here. This bullet is 1 platoon. This bullet is 2 platoon. But you move it along and use them as models. Collaboration is very important in command. The commander has his idea of how to accomplish the mission, but there's many arms of different branches of the service underneath him. The 3rd Canadian Division, when they landed there, it wasn't just infantry soldiers landing. There was a brigade of tanks landing as well. Many field artillery regiments. There was the support that had to follow them on. The medical units had to follow them on. All this, and they all had to collaborate and not get in each other's way and understand where they needed to be in order to accomplish the missions. And when we first received this artifact, and we actually found it in the collection, we were able to have it digitized by Parks Canada, and they made a full-size replica of it. So unfortunately, we can't unroll this due to the brittleness of the map, but I'd love to take you down to where Parks Canada has it on display, and we can take a look at the full-size map as it is.
Oh, I'd love to see that. I've been really dying to see what's inside here. The size of this really is incredible, Gary. So this is an exact replica of what the one you have at the museum looks like.
That's correct. Parks Canada expressed interest in digitizing it and using the map for their D-Day exhibit. They digitized it, and then they printed it out, and this is exactly what we have up in the museum. Correct size, same colors, everything's the same.
That's incredible, and I have to say, when I do see the size of this, I really am struck by the fact that that original does survive today.
It's amazing. There's one small rip, and in fact, if you look up there, there's a rip down there. That's the same rip that we have upstairs. That was made up so it would blow up the area that they were going to be operating in, so that the commanders could brief their subordinates as to what the plan was and what they expected them to accomplish. So we're basically looking at Juno Beach and the 3rd Canadian Division's area of operation.
So it must have been made in quite a rush.
Yeah, it was. It's got what you need. It's got the built-up areas, the water features, all the roadways on there. There's contour lines where the hills will be. So everything you need is here.
And you can really understand from the scale of this, the amount of men that could have been around this inspecting it at the time.
Correct. Could be all on the floor, and everyone could be around it, and the commander is there with a stick going, this is where I want you to go, this is where I want you to go. This map was designed to be so big, so it would be easier for the spectators in the orders group that was receiving the orders to understand the plan better. They're able to see the ground in a lot more detail than they would on a smaller map.
I really appreciate your bringing me down here to show me this. It's been really fascinating to be able to look at this map. Thank you so much for showing me.
Oh, you're welcome.
Coming up next, I'll recount the courageous tale of Jim McCrae, whose heroism earned him the Distinguished Flying Cross. At the Aviation Museum, we're going to dive into the story of Jim McCrae, a distinguished pilot from the Second World War. McCrae received the Distinguished Flying Cross for his extraordinary bravery in aerial combat. His journey from a small farm in Alberta to the skies over Europe reflects his unwavering passion for flight and dedication to his country. I understand that Jim McCrae has a really incredible story.
It is quite a story. Jim McCrae was an RCAF Canso pilot and served within 162 Squadron in Iceland. In fact, he actually won the DFC for what he actually did over there. Jim McCrae was a RCAF Canso pilot who successfully sunk a U-boat and had a career after the post-war with the RCAF. Ultimately lived to the ripe old age of 106.
Mark, could you walk me through the different photos we have on the table as well as the log?
So, photo Jim McCrae, this is obviously post award of his DFC, because we can see his DFC spur. This isn't the U-boat that Jim sank, but it's a similar operation. This is a shot of his crew in Iceland. This is actually a 162 operational aircraft. And this picture is taken at Yarmouth, Nova Scotia, where they were initially based. They were deployed from there to Iceland and also ultimately to Scotland as well.
What can you tell me about his early life?
Jim McCrae was born in Alberta in 1917, decided to become a pilot and was trained through the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan, flew solo out west on various BCATP training bases, ultimately was assigned in early 1943 to number 162 Squadron, which was an RCF squadron in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia. Squadron 162 was designed to protect against enemy activity off the coasts of Atlantic Canada.
The presence of many U-boats along the coast. So did Jim McCrae engage with any enemies throughout the war?
It was the only squadron that was actually assigned to, they call it the HWE, which was basically the home squadrons. In January 1944, RCF 162 Squadron was sent to Reykjavik, Iceland. The RCF deployed a number of support logistics to do this, including sending an RCF boat loaded with supplies, and it did enable them to create Camp Maple Leaf, which was the base that 162 operated out in Reykjavik, the main base that they were operating out of. And there were tremendous supply line issues operating that way, and it was very much a logistic exercise, as well as juggling Canso aircraft back and forth between Canada and Iceland.
And I know that at one point, of course, he was flying Cansos. Was that something he did for the entirety of the war?
Yes, he flew Cansos. The Canso was a Canadian built at this point by Vickers in Montreal. It had a very good long range, but it was relatively slow. It wasn't necessarily armed as heavily as it could have been. The Canso was built by Vickers in Montreal from a design of the Constellated Catalina. The Canso was the Canadian version, and it was a twin-engined amphibious aircraft that could land on water and land the land as well. Also used for anti-submarine. It carried various depth charges and weaponry involved that enabled it to sink U-boats. 1943-44, the U-boats had been upgraded with heavier weaponry on their upper decks. The policy at that point was to basically fight it out with the attacking anti-submarine aircraft. It was a fairly easy target, but their Canso was fairly slow. It's lumbering to some degree. They were using different types of depth charges, acoustic type torpedoes, and there was a tremendous amount of technology development in that sort of weaponry as well at the same time. You had to lay your charges almost directly on the craft. In order to do that, you had to get fairly close, but then at the same time, that U-boat's firing up a hail of fire at you. It was a very intense time, particularly for 162 in that month of June.
So Mark, tell me a bit more about this story.
On June 13th, 1944, Jim McCrae's crew successfully attacked and sank a U-boat. They also received fire from the U-boat, which ultimately caused them to have to force land and leave the aircraft. All of a sudden, they were pitched in cold northern waters. Full-scale operation to rescue them then began to proceed. And even at this point, it was quite an effort to actually drop actual airborne lifeboats to them, and in addition, further rafts when those were damaged in landing. The crew had to endure this for 8.5 hours before finally a high-speed launch was finally able to pull them out of the ocean. In addition, they'd already lost 3 crewmen. They were sitting fairly cold and exposed after this point. So even after this mission, they were back in operation. 5 days later, Jim was flying again, actively working, looking for the U-boats.
Wow, that's a really incredible story, Mark.
Well, it is, and even more so was the fact that it was recognized that McCrae and his crew were all awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for their action on this particular day. The Distinguished Flying Cross is a medal awarded for aircrew involved in action involving the enemy and deemed award-worthy.
Did you ever have the opportunity to meet Jim McCrae?
Yes, I did, and I've heard him talk about his exploits over the years and that sort of stuff. And unfortunately, we lost Jim McCrae this year. He was at the ripe old age of 106. I think he was obviously born in 1917. I think he lived a very good life. Post-war, he flew with the RCAF, ended up in Yarmouth, involved in the airport operations at Yarmouth for a number of years. One of the aircraft he flew I actually came to Yarmouth in 1984 and got to see it in that way. Even today, there's still a Canso that he flew that they're looking at bringing to Yarmouth again this year. Ultimately was to reunite it with Jim, but unfortunately Jim is gone, so they're still going to bring the aircraft to Yarmouth to celebrate Jim. Jim was part of a team, and how the Cansos were operated was a team because of the number of people that needed to fly it and operate with it. That holds true even today. Jim McCrea was a very modest man. He was one of a number of crew members on his aircraft. 3 of those crew members paid the ultimate sacrifice on that particular mission where they sank the U-boat. And I think it's part of that legacy that Jim wanted to promote to make sure that the story was told. Jim didn't consider himself a war hero. Jim was fiercely loyal to Cansos, and he certainly loved the Canso, and he loved to fly it. And I think he had an enduring relationship with the aircraft for all of his life.
Mark, thank you so much for taking me through the harrowing story of Jim McCrea and his wartime service. It also, I'm sure, is the story of so many other pilots who were flying in the Atlantic during the Second World War. So incredible to see, his true commitment to duty, being back flying only 6 days after being shot down by that U-boat. Up next, the unique history of a ship that went from serving in the Royal Navy to leading a critical medical expedition on Easter Island, learning about the innovative technologies that made this mission possible. Today, I'm exploring the story of HMCS Cape Scott, a versatile ship refitted to support a crucial medical mission to Easter Island in 1964. This mission showcased Canada's commitment to global health and set a precedent for humanitarian efforts in naval history. I understand that you have a truly enticing story of medical research that was undertaken by the Royal Canadian Navy on Easter Island that's still benefiting us today.
I do. It's a very interesting group of artifacts that were given in commemoration and in thankfulness to HMCS Cape Scott for their medical research and their outreach to the community.
I can't wait to see what they are. Tell me, Lisa, what exactly am I looking at here?
These beautiful wooden statues are actually given in recognition and thanks to HMCS Cape Scott, its commander, Commander Tony Law, and the scientists and sailors aboard the ship. The ship went to Easter Island, 1965, and they were there sent on a medical expedition to take samples and to study the indigenous people of the island, the Rapa Nui, and to conduct experiments on the soil and on the surroundings.
What can you tell me about the HMCS Cape Scott?
The ship was a facility management ship. It was based on the East Coast. Its commander was Tony Law, and it was refitted to create and start this medical expedition to Easter Island. HMCS Cape Scott was a medical expedition to Easter Island, and the acronym was METI, the METI expedition.
What was the purpose of the mission to Easter Island?
Cape Scott was used as a transport vessel for a medical expedition to Easter Island. They wanted to be able to set up an entire community of labs, scientific research outlets. They wanted to recreate a medical setting so that they could do scientific experiments. They also wanted to study the population of the Rapa Nui.
So they had retrofitted the ship specifically for this mission?
Yes, this was a long expedition for the ship. They refitted the ship so that it could carry 4,000 to 9,000 barrels of fuel for this expedition.
Oh my, well, I guess going the distance to Easter Island, they would have to make those sorts of provisions.
Absolutely. This expedition was brought about through the research and the queries of Dr. Stanley Scora. He was the head of the gastrointestinal department at McGill University. He was interested in studying the correlation between environmental factors and stomach cancer and peptic ulcers. Interesting, though, that leaving from Halifax due to the Panama Canal was a quicker route to Easter Island than leaving from Vancouver. That's why Cape Scott was assigned this task, not West Scotia.
Oh, that's really fascinating, and certainly not something I would have thought of. When you think about the globe, you would think that Vancouver would be far closer.
Exactly. Geographically, it blew my mind.
And from what I understand, there was some sense of urgency to get to the island.
Yes. The expedition left Halifax December 1964 because there was a timeline crunch all of a sudden when the researchers learned that there was going to be an international airport on Easter Island. And so Dr. Stanley Sycro wanted to make sure he got there before the environmental factors would contaminate any research that he was hoping to do.
And when the ship arrived at Easter Island, did they truly find an untouched population?
They did not. It was a surprise to the researchers. They had assumed that only once a year a government ship from Chile would reach Easter Island, when actually it was quite a busy seaport. They were geographically isolated, but not socially isolated.
Really? And what sort of evidence did they find of that?
I think the Cape Scott crew arrived there and found out they had access to radios, newspapers, magazines. They had cigarettes. So this was not the untouched population that they were expecting.
No, that must have come as quite a shock upon arrival.
Exactly. But in the end, it provided even more interesting results. The initial endeavors of the expedition did not provide the results they were expecting. However, Dr. Norgay discovered an antifungal presence in the soil that eventually led to rapamycin. The long journey of rapamycin started in Easter Island and has currently continued to grow as a treatment for COVID and is being used as an antibiotic.
Given the fact that the officers and crew of Cape Scott received these as gifts from the people of Easter Island, I would assume that they benefited as well.
Yes, at the time there were private scientists working on this project, university students and professors working on this project. So it really was a community effort to enable and support Easter Island.
And you can really see that this was done through pure altruism in many cases, based on the fact that some of these researchers paid their own way to get there.
Yes, it was a group effort, and they came together, and it shows in a united front. Everything that the expedition used was donated by the pharmaceutical and research companies of Canada, the water filtration systems, the medical labs, even the units and the truck that was sent down on Cape Scott was left at the island for the inhabitants to use.
Given the potential benefit of the research done on this operation, why do you think it is not better known?
I've been able to find the preliminary reports for the Medi expedition, but as far as I can find, and to the best of my knowledge, there was no final report of the Medi experiment. So perhaps people were waiting for a final conclusion, an end to the research and the notes, and it was never published.
And I suppose in some ways, though, we really still don't have a conclusion with they're still utilizing the tests and so on that went on this expedition.
Absolutely. It's far-reaching and ongoing from one goodwill tour, how it's still helping humanity today. Easter Island expedition was a collaboration between many units, both civilian and military. This was the first time the Royal Canadian Navy participated in a scientific medical expedition, and in partnership with many Canadian universities at the time. There was an emphasis on getting this done as soon as possible, so under time restrictions and constraints, everyone pulled together and got this job done.
Lisa, thank you so much for pulling these out for me to look at today. It's been a wonderful opportunity to examine that great history of collaboration between the Navy and other civilian organizations.
I believe that there's a beautiful connection between art and service, and this represents both.
It certainly does. Having special access to go beyond museum exhibits reveals some of history's best-kept secrets and most interesting stories. Thank you for joining me in this exploration of military artifacts on another episode of Militaria at the museum.